Hello, this is the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Thank you so much for tuning into this video in which we will look at operations with decimals. So we'll look at adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing decimals. So let's start with adding and subtracting. So use long addition or subtraction. So if you have something like 0.32 plus 0.78, let's arrange them in columns. Make sure decimal point is under the decimal point, and then we will add them. So we just add them in columns starting at the right. So 2 plus 8 is obviously 10, so you put 0 there, carry the 1. 7 plus 3 plus 1 is 11, so we put the 1 down and carry another 1. So make sure decimal point is under the decimal points, and then of course 1 plus 0 is 1. So 0.32 plus 0.78 is 1.10, or just 1.1. So for 1 minus 0.875, we're going to do something similar. We're going to arrange it in columns. So we have 1 minus 0.875. Now, if one of the numbers has more digits after the decimal place than the other, just put in some zeros, because 1 is the same as 1.000. We want the same number of digits after the decimal place in both numbers. So when we're subtracting, sometimes we might need to borrow. We can't do 0 minus 5 in this algorithm, so we're going to need to borrow. Well, we can't borrow here, we can't borrow here. We'll have to borrow from the 1. So we're going to cross out the 1 and make it a 0, and then we're going to make that a 10. So I need to borrow for this one. So what I'm going to need to do is change this 10 into a 9. So I can lend 1 here and then do the same thing. I'm going to cross this out, make it a 9, so I can make this a 10. So I borrowed 1 from here, and this borrowed 1 from here, which borrowed 1 from there. So now we're able to do it. We can just go 10 minus 5 is 5. 9 minus 7 is 2, 9 minus 8 is 1. Make sure decimal point is under decimal point, and we've got 0 minus 0, which is just 0. So 1 minus 0.875 is just 0.125. All right, let's now look at multiplying and dividing. So when we're multiplying decimals, we first multiply the numbers as if there is no decimal point. So for 1.1 times 12, I'm just going to do 11 times 12. Disregard the decimal point. So 11 times 12 is 132. But obviously that's way too big for 1.1 times 12. What I need to do is make this number here have the same number of digits after the decimal point that were in the question. So in the question, we had 1 digit after the decimal point, and this had none. So in my answer, I make sure there's 1 number after the decimal point. So 1.1 times 12 is just 13.2. All right, let's do 0.9 times 0.08. So again, firstly, I'm just going to multiply the numbers without the decimal places. So 9 times 8 is 72. But in the question, there were 1, 2, 3 digits after the decimal point. So I need to make sure my answer has 3 numbers after the decimal point. Problem is, if I put the decimal point here, I only have 2 digits after the decimal place. So what you do is add zeros at the front. So now my answer has 1, 2, 3 digits after the decimal point, just like the question, 1, 2, 3 digits after the decimal point. So we can write it as 0.072 or 0.072. It doesn't matter too much. All right, let's now look at dividing decimals. So when dividing decimals, it's probably helpful to write it as a fraction and then make sure the denominator is a whole number. So for 3.6 divided by 2, we already have that the denominator is a whole number. So how do we figure out what this is? Well, you probably know that 36 divided by 2 is 18. So 3.6 divided by 2 is going to be the same number but have one digit after the decimal place. So half of 3.6, which is what you get when you divide by 2, is just 1.8. So how do we do 4 divides 0.08? Well, let's write it as a fraction. Now you can see here that the denominator, what's on the bottom, is not a whole number. So what I want to do is make it a whole number. So I want to move this decimal point. If I move it here, it's still not a whole number, 0.8. But if I move it over here, it is a whole number. I want to move the decimal point 2 spots to the right, and that is the same as multiplying by 100. If you multiply 0.08 by 100, you get 8. You get a whole number, which is what I wanted. But remember the way fractions work. You can't just multiply the bottom by 100. What you do to the bottom, you must do to the top. So we multiply the top by 100 also. So 4 times 100 is just 400, and as we said before, 0.08 times 100 is 8. These two are equivalent fractions, but this one's a lot easier to work with. We have 400 divided by 8. Now, if you get something like this and you're not sure how to divide it, you can also use the short division algorithm. So 400 divided by 8 is saying how many times does 8 go into 400? So you go, how many times does 8 go into 4? It goes 0 times, remainder 4. How many times does 8 go into 40? It goes 5, remainder 0. How many times does 8 go into 0? Well, 0 times. 400 divided by 8 is equal to 50. Okay, a quicker way to do this, 400 divided by 8, if you know 40 divided 8 is 5, then 400 divided by 8 is 50. Either way you do it is fine. Just make sure when you're dividing decimals, you write it as a fraction and make this into a whole number, because whole number division is much easier than decimal division. All right, thank you so much for tuning into this video. This has been the luckiest maths teacher in the world. Have a great day.